Alright, so we're checking out the iFlight Nazgul Evoque F4. So this comes in two different versions. This is a 4-inch frame. This is the dead cat version, and dead cat means it has dead cat arms so that the props don't show up in your video feed. It does come in a squashed X version as well, where the front arms are more forward and the props will show up in the video feed of the O3 air unit. This one actually looks really similar to the 6-inch, version of this frame that I reviewed a while back. The 5-inch version is a little different in terms of the front. I guess there was like, they made the 5-inch version with a different front, and they redesigned this frame for the 6-inch with this sort of new front end here. Looks like this with this aluminum cage. And then now they've adapted this one to a 4-inch frame. I guess they went with a 4-inch instead of a 3.5-inch here. I guess most people are, aren't as interested in the 3.5-inch unless it's sub 250. So it's kind of interesting. You can't always just put 3.5-inch props on this if you want to go to a 3.5-inch setup. But the frame design itself is pretty similar to the way a 5-inch frame is set up. You basically have this bottom plate here. You have some arms sandwiched in here, and then another top plate right over here, and it's sort of a split level design here. And then they have this little area here for the receiver. In my case, I didn't get a receiver. I just flew it with the DJI Remote Controller 2 through the O3 air unit. I believe it comes with two versions of Express LRS receivers, 2.4 and 915 megahertz, and TBS Crossfire is the other receiver option, and that would live right here if you get the receiver version. Pretty standard 4mm arms here, 2mm top plates and bottom plates. So it's kind of basically like a shrunken down 5-inch frame. If you're kind of coming from the micro world, it's like, oh, well, does it look more like a blown up 3-inch frame or more like a shrunken down 5-inch frame? This is more like a shrunken down 5-inch frame. A lot of the micro frames, like the bottom plates, will be like a single piece of carbon to make it a lot lighter, etc. This is fairly heavy. I'll go over the weights here in a second. It does come with F7 flight controller stack, so it's got the Blitz series. It's a 20x20 stack. F7 for the flight controller, and then you have 55 amp 4-in-1 ESC in there. Then you got this shroud here with this little cover here for the USB-C port. This is pretty much resembles exactly the 5-inch Evoque and the 6-inch Evoque in terms of the styling. And then you have your air unit here in the back. It does have I believe there's a heatsink or something right over here. So it does come with one of the top parts of the O3 air unit replaced with a heatsink in there for better air cooling, because it is sort of basically only the sides get direct airflow. So there's an additional heatsink inside there to dissipate some of the heat. So the motors on here are 2205 in size, and you see there's no markings on the motor bell. Unsure what the KV is. They said this is intended for a 6S battery, so this is what I went with. I went with a 1300 6S here. I'll link this in the video description. This is probably a pretty good one to go for if you want a good mix of sort of performance and flight time. If you want more performance, I would go with a smaller battery, and that would give you less flight time. You can go as low as a 1050, and I think we can go as high as a 1400 if you want less performance and the most amount of flight time. And for the 1300, you can roughly get around 4 to 5 minutes of flight time, mix of sort of freestyle and sort of casual cruising around. So there is an optional 3D printed part here for GoPro mount. If you want to add that on, you can do that, and of course, put on a Hero 11 Mini or something like that. If you're trying to get GoPro footage of something like this with the O3 air unit, I would actually recommend going with the 5 or 6-inch version of this if you intend to primarily just get it for GoPro footage, because the heavier weight does reduce flight time and performance of this. And I'm thinking, people that aren't necessarily interested in the GoPro footage, but they just want to get good 4K footage out of the O3 air unit camera, this is a good option if you're intending, if you want something with a little bit smaller profile, and that's what the 4-inch props gives you. Basically, the only reason you would go for this model over a 5-inch is if you don't intend to fly with a GoPro. So if you're happy with O3 air unit 4K footage, then and you want something a little bit smaller and more portable to sort of carry around with you, although it doesn't really weigh that much less than a 5-inch, I would go for this. If you're intending to fly with a GoPro and primarily use it for GoPro footage, I would not get this one. I would get the 5-inch or the 6-inch and go with the GoPro and go with that footage. Now, in terms of flying this around like this without a GoPro on here on this 1300, to me it feels kind of like a heavier 5-inch. So if you get like a heavier 5-inch build with a GoPro on there, this is kind of how it feels in flight in the air, because it does have that sort of, it has quite a bit of heft and weight, and so it does drop like a 5-inch. But because they are dealing with a 4-inch propeller here, by this is an HQ 4x3x3, because you have a 4-inch propeller instead of a 5-inch propeller, it doesn't have quite the amount of power to weight ratio that a full-size 5-inch would have. That's a little bit on the lighter side. So this is what it kind of feels like in the air. The pitch tune on this is really good. Basically no prop wash, and going in doing all kinds of different tricks. And I did try and bring out some prop wash, but it was very smooth, especially going into its own prop wash. So if you're worried about the tune, iFlight does a pretty good job. This is a good setup here, and the tune for this battery seems almost perfect to me. So basically just put the props on, bound it to my goggles and transmitter, and then charge with the battery and fluid, and yeah, it was really good out of the box. Alright, so here's how much it weighs. No battery. And coming in at 341.6 grams. So then with the 1300 6S coming in at 535 grams, of course no GoPro, I didn't fly with a GoPro. And so this is, a little bit lighter than your typical 5-inch, but basically it's pretty close to a 5-inch, and as you can see, well over the 250 gram limit. So for those of you who care about that kind of stuff, this will require registration, all that kind of stuff. So if you're looking for a 4-inch or 3.5-inch, that has got the O3 air unit that's going to be sub 250 with good flight time, I would recommend looking at the Baby Hawk O3 from Emax. Of course, that's a much lighter frame, not as robust as this frame, kind of a tank. May not be as durable, but it's going to get you under the 250 gram limit for those of you that are concerned about that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think that's going to cover for this video. iFlight, they, are trying to sort of give a lot of different options for a lot of different people. So obviously this isn't going to be a great option for everybody. Typically a lot of people that fly 5-inch are going to be flying with the GoPro. But maybe if you don't care about the GoPro, if you want something a little bit smaller, a little bit lighter, and you're okay with the 4K footage from the O3 air unit, then maybe this is a good option for you. That's kind of what I'm thinking in terms of like who this might be really good for. But otherwise, like I said, this is kind of a niche little segment, and it's kind of offering as another option there for somebody that maybe prefer something smaller, like flying a 3-inch, and maybe you want to move up to something a little bigger, but you don't want to move all the way up to a 5-inch, or maybe you like the 5-inch, but maybe you want to fly something just a little bit smaller and lighter. Then this kind of fills that sort of gap in between the micro size 3-inch and under and the full size 5-inch and over. So that's kind of where I think this kind of belongs. And again, like I said, it's not for everybody, but yeah, it's a good model and comes with a good pitch tune. And if you just want something bind and fly, bind into your goggles, transmitter, charge up some batteries, and go and fly it, this one will work pretty well. All right, that's all cover for this video. Got any questions, let me know. Talk to you guys in the next one.